Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Angel. How are you back there? You're doing good? Good. Hi, Mitch. Thanks for being up front today. You're even on time. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to hang out here up front, far away from you, because I have a cold, and I don't want any of you to catch it. And if I end up leaving early, it's because I just need to go lay down. But thanks for coming. I don't think we have any new people this meeting, right? Okay, good. We've got a fairly packed agenda, a lot to update you on, and some time for some Q&A on some upcoming topics. No training this time. We're going to kind of revisit how we work professional development into our meetings together, as well as make sure we have the time to get through some of the administrative work that we need to get done as well. So we're going to get straight off into it. And John, I think I'm turning this over to you to talk about cybersecurity in a particular program.
Thanks, Barry. Sir, is there a clicker? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John McKeon. I work in IT as the lead for information security, and I am so glad we're doing this after lunch rather than before lunch. I'm here today to talk to you about phishing, and I don't know how many people are here are familiar with the term phishing. Okay, that's great, absolutely fantastic. Well, I'm going to introduce a program that's being rolled out by DAS, Enterprise Information Services, and their Office of Cybersecurity Services, and it's a program that is to educate and help us understand how big the problem is. It's actually quite a big problem. We find that about 60% or more of the malware that gets into our environment comes from somebody clicking on a link in an email. So we're rolling out this program, not as a punitive measure. It's not to punish anyone, but it's to help us understand the problem and provide an education for training for our employees. The cool thing about it is it's going to be customizable and targeted, so that we'll be able to, for example, our executives are a target for spear phishing, for example. So we'll be able to create specialized campaigns that are targeted to people in positions that have a particular risk profile, so accounting, systems administrators, our executives. And we're also going to be able to measure the response in such a way that we can compare ourselves to the state and to see how what we're doing is in the bigger ecosystem. It'll provide real-time feedback to the employees that happen to hit a phish. And so what it's going to look like is we'll be communicating with the agency director, our CIO, the IT management team, service desk, and human resources will all be involved in rolling out the program. And then we will communicate to the employees that it's not something that we're trying to do as a gotcha. We're not trying to catch people. It's basically we're trying to protect the organization through an educational campaign that allows us to understand the problem and then create programs that are targeted. For example, right now we see IRS scams, and maybe something compared about the coronavirus. We see emails coming in that people are interested in clicking on for those reasons. And so we want to find ways to educate people about that problem and how to not be subjected to the risks that are associated to that. And we'll also be communicating with employees how they're impacted. And what that will be is employee engagement will include what will happen is if they click on an email, a phishing email, they'll go to a landing page that'll explain exactly what happened and how they could have identified the phish and how they could have avoided it. And they get 3 free tries. Yes, exactly. And on the 4th time, the idea isn't to punish people, but it's to identify those that could probably use a little more training. Yeah, so
we won't lose email privileges though, right?
No, nothing to do with that. Well, if clicking on a phish takes out the email system, we might lose email privileges. But we do work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. But on the 4th try, they'll be enrolled in an iLearn course that is specially tailored to helping them learn about this issue. And their manager will be notified so that they understand that their employee is participating in the educational program. And,
And the manager's enrolled also.
well, yeah, well, and that's something to worry about as well, right? I guess you can self-enroll by clicking on the emails 4 times if you're interested in seeing the training. But if you go for 5 consecutive phishing simulation emails within 12 months, you get off the program. And so I think this is going to be a really positive thing for everyone. If anybody has any questions, yeah, Tammy.
So this training that you would have to do is that a training we've all received before? Do we already know what's up?
No, this is going to be brand new training, and the trainings will be tailored to. It'll be structured based upon the scope of the problem.
So, but will everybody get a training before I click 4 times?
Well, we could certainly look into an opportunity to do that based upon, as part of the rollout. I think it'd be really great to let people know an awareness campaign, and also that everybody's a part of cybersecurity, but also letting people know that this is happening, and also helping them to further protect the organization by knowing how to identify a phishing email.
But all I need to know right now is don't click on them.
Well, yeah. So before we start doing this, we will be sharing information on what you look for.
Oh, perfect, that's what I
Yeah, yeah. And also, I think this is a good opportunity to mention that we have an information security newsletter, and we've covered phishing many, many times. So I encourage everyone to go into SharePoint, search for information security, read the fun newsletters. But I think to answer your question, we will be making sure that we educate people about what phishing is and what we're going to do as part of the campaign. And we don't want people thinking that we're trying to trick them or that we're out to get them. We want it to be a positive experience. Yeah.
Congratulatory email if you're successfully removed program.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping we can do something for the people that do not fall for the fish. And I think maybe a graduation certificate may be appropriate. Sure. Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Kevin.
Myself, Mario, and Karen. All right. Hello, everyone. So we're going to just take a couple minutes to talk about the Employee Recognition Committee, more specifically where we've been, what we've learned, and what we plan to do going forward. So last year overview. So 2019 was the second year implementing the enterprise-wide Employee Recognition Awards, and we saw some really good growth from 2018 to 2019. I think we went from 8 nominations in 2018 to 37 nominations in 2019, and the goal is to continue to see growth over the next few years, but especially this year. And Karen's going to jump into kind of what we've learned through a survey and what we're going to apply this year.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. So we did a survey. We wanted to see how we did, especially around communication. So we asked a couple of questions. One was, before today, were you aware of the Employee Recognition Program? So we got some pretty good results, but we had also some opportunities. Our next question was, how clear were the instructions? And I think you can see there was room for improvement there. 46% thought the definitions, that they were clear, but some 46%, so split, thought they were somewhat clear. So that was part of what we wanted to improve on this next year. And so then the next, we wanted to know how important was it knowing who the winners were. So we were really split on that. And then how important is it knowing how the winners were selected? And again, I think you can see that was an area for us to improve on. And you can see the comments. It seemed like the selection was slightly arbitrary. It felt like when it came time to make a decision, people chose candidates they were very familiar with. That makes it seem like a popularity contest. And then transparency, of course, being important. So those are some of the things that we addressed as we were planning for 2020.
Some of the improvements that we've made is going to be around communication. We're actually communicating earlier this year. We started in January. That's already on eLink, and we're going to be there's emails already going out. Another change that we're doing is we're going to be putting the nominees when they come in. We're going to be putting them on SharePoint so people to increase the visibility of those that are nominated as we go along. Also, with one of the awards, the commitment to state service, we're actually going to be giving employees the opportunity to vote on an entire list of nominees. So that's really going to, put the ball in their court. Let's see here. And then for the second, or the other award, the Ambassador of Public Service, there's 4 categories that need to be filled out by those who end up nominating people. Should someone fill out or nominate someone and only do the top 3, we're going to actually reach out to the manager to do the 4th one. And that's going to, if you want to, the original nomination, if you're wanting the nomination, you can ask Elisa or Gina and they'll provide that. Again, we're just going to reach out for the ones that weren't filled out for that particular award.
All right, we're moving along here. So a quick recap and also a timeline of what to expect over the next few months. So communication, as Mario mentioned, it's already started on eLink. There's already been a couple articles, so check it out, and there'll continue to be communication. We're going to launch nominations next week. Leave it open. It says for a month up there. I think it's closer to 6 weeks because we closed the nomination on 3/20. We're hoping to get a lot of participation, as much participation as possible. That's why we'll see weekly communications throughout the nomination process. After 3/20, we'll compile entries and we'll open voting for the commitment to state service. Going back to what Karen mentioned, where it felt like a popularity contest, we're trying to remove that from the equation and give everyone an opportunity to vote for who they want to vote for, specific to the commitment to state service. And then once voting's complete and we've identified the winners, we're going to communicate that on April 15th. We're looking to do some sort of a celebration around that. It'll be smaller, but we want to make the announcement a little bit of a celebration. That was a lesson learned from last year. And then we'll celebrate again during the Employee Recognition Week, May 4th through 8th. So that being said, any questions? All right, mission accomplished. Thank you. I don't know who's next.
Don't think that by not asking questions, I'm going to let you out early.
Well, with that being said, I'm going to be quick. So over the last year, I think, IT and the analytics team have been working pretty hard on finding a new analytics platform to replace the hundreds of Excel reports and Power View reports and endless PDFs that we have. So we've got that in place, and that's why I'm here today to talk to you about how that's going to work. So, raise of hands or show of hands, who knows what Power BI is? Sweet. For those of you who don't know, it is our new analytics platform. It's from Microsoft. It lets you visualize your information and share insights through interactive and live dashboards. Basically, what we're talking about is pretty graphs on your mobile devices. We spend quite a bit of time thinking about our platform, software solutions, hardware, and relating it to how Gartner rates those. Microsoft is pretty close to the front runner, and I say pretty close because in terms of adoption, Tableau is right there. And if you've been in any of the conversations with IGT specific to Intelligent and Aurora, you'll know that the new platform that they're introducing for reporting is Tableau. We're going the Power BI route with Microsoft. They're not going to conflict at all. Microsoft Power BI will be our platform. Tableau will be IGT's platform. We can still use both. The reason that it's a leader is the intuitive platform, and it is comprehensive from end to end. And for the most part, that really only impacts the analytics and IT teams. How it impacts you is, can I get the information I need with ease? So, what is so great about this platform? First and foremost, we're able to centralize all the information that we have at our disposal and bring it together into a single location. So whether the data is on-prem or in the cloud, or if we're scraping the data from another website, we can bring it all together into a single data model, which is something that we've never been able to do unless we want to ingest it into our data warehouse, which takes quite a bit of time. We can introduce drill-through dashboards. So today, if you have accessed any product reporting that we have on SharePoint, you'll notice that there are dozens of pages in these what are called Power View reports. In a true drill-through dashboard, if you only care about 2 or 3 of the visuals in those reports, you can pin those into a dashboard. And when I say you can do that, what I mean is we'll help you do that. If you only care about 2 metrics, we'll create a dashboard for you and to make sure that you're getting the content that you need. Long term, that's something that will be more self-service, but we're not going to go 0 to 60 in no time. We're also going to be introducing mobile reporting. So Power BI offers a mobile app that we will be testing and rolling out. So you'll be able to consume information on your lottery devices while not connected to this network, which is pretty cool. Even more important, that anything that you do on that mobile device, the device caches that information, and so you can see it off network, which is definitely a challenge for our field service and field sales staff, is they get into these pockets of zero network. And so anything that they've done on those reports while on network, they'll still be able to do when they lose that connectivity. This is what, if we really want to nerd out, this is one of the cool features. So it's called Natural Language Query. If we set up our data the way that it should be set up, you as stakeholders can basically type into a search bar a question like, what were last year's sales by product? And what returns is an interactive visual. So gone are the days of having to knock on IT or the analytics team's door for something as simple as that type of a question. We can also stay informed real time. So we could set up thresholds for when a certain metric crosses a threshold, meaning, let's say Shad is interested in issues with the app, crashes. If we have more than 6 crashes in a week, alert the digital marketing team. We could set up those notifications through an add-on with Power BI so that everybody stays informed without having to go to that dashboard on a daily or a weekly basis. And lastly, we can embed insights into a website. We could also embed them into SharePoint when we upgrade to SharePoint Online. You won't have to access the report through another link. You could see it right there on an embedded page. Another option would be potentially responding to public records requests in a more modern approach. So rather than having a public records request form or sending out PDFs or CSV files, the really nerdy consumers that we have that want to see how many times a certain set of numbers has been drawn, we could potentially set something up through a Power BI report. All right, how do you use it today, Elisa? So if you go to the eLink homepage, in this red box of shortcuts, you've got Sales Update. Now that used to point you to kind of an antiquated report. We've flipped that to Power BI. If you haven't accessed this report, you may be asked for confirmation of your Office 365 email. Reach out to me or IT for that information. We've already been in touch with the service desk on how to actually access this, but you shouldn't have any issues considering what we've done for single sign-on. Is that fair, Nate? Sure. I'm not going to get into too much detail with this. It's kind of small, so if you were to click on that little expander button, would take you to a full screen mode. Thank you. So basically what we're looking at here is a replacement for that old report. This section is going to be our product sales year over year and forecast. We also have some weekly trending and our jackpots. You can change the time period that is displayed by clicking this down arrow. And you've got several options here, from what happened last week to several different, to several different lookbacks. So Lisa selected the last 26 weeks. The table changes to reflect that. We've also got a product slicer on the left. Slicers or filters, they're generally the same. You can select any product from this list and it will change the table and the graph. We don't have to do that right now. You could also interact with the table. So if you were to click on Scratchits in the table, that changes the graph. So now you're only looking at Scratchits data. Click on it again and it goes back to the previous view. The last piece, and we're going to try to do this for more broad rollouts. On the top right, we've got a reference guide that takes you to a PDF of essentially everything I just said. Okay. Love that slide animation. All right, what's our plan? Everything we're doing is crawl, walk, run, right? And we've certainly tried to start to do that with this as well. The time that it's taken to acquire and configure the platform for our needs has been a little bit longer than we would have liked, but as far as resource availability, IT and R&A, or Business Analytics and Insights, are pretty tapped. So I think we're at a point now where the configuration of the platform is ready to go. We've deployed our first report. We've also deployed a replacement for all of the technical service reports that Mitch and Dave's team use. So I feel like we've tried to establish some of those quick wins, or at least address the needs that are most urgent, like being able to access reporting from any web browser. Barry? Next is we're going to start to tap into replacing our existing product reports, starting with Video Lottery and Scratchits, the two probably most responsive products that we have. We're going to go to Draw Games, and then we're going to go to Scoreboard. Why is Scoreboard in the middle of Phase 2? Well, notice there's no dates on here. We'll get to it when we can get to it, given our resource constraints. But Scoreboard data is kind of in a few different spots, and we've got some reconciliation challenges with that product. Kathy, you can attest to that. But we will get there. Now, as we transition these reports or build new reports, the analytics team is going to be in very close collaboration with each of you to, one, define the metrics that matter most, and then let's talk about how we can design these reports so that you can consume the information in the easiest way possible. We're also going to be testing and deploying the Power BI mobile app, as well as the add-on that I mentioned to give you kind of push notification via email called Power Automate. And Phase 3 and beyond will be, again, reaching out to some of those more disjointed data sources or data sources that we're going to be working on modernizing over the next few years. Mobile app and web. Similar to Scoreboard, we've got data kind of everywhere, so trying to wrangle that in so that we can analyze it and display it in the most useful way possible. And then we'll start reaching out to field sales a little bit more actively, retail contracts, the call center. We've got some demand from HR. As we replace AX with D365, there's going to be a whole lot of Power BI development there. And there's also an opportunity as we move forward with ITSM that we could start to have some additional reporting if it's not already embedded in that tool. Needless to say, this is a big list. We've got a lot to do, and it's going to take us some time to do it. So we're currently exploring some additional help from a business intelligence development perspective, whether that is reaching out to a contractor or door number 3. That's basically it. Any questions on this, or you can just tell me that this is great and you're really excited, and I'll smile and go back to my seat.
Hi, I'm working with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team, and we are working on a small group. There's only 3 of us involved, and Anthony's going to speak with me. And we have decided we're trying to figure out what way we can drive the lottery forward. And what we decided to work on is the interview process. And right now, as far as I'm concerned, the way I do it is I look at the managers that I work with and say, okay, this is the one I work with. So I usually work with Annie, and then I usually bring somebody from my team. But I don't usually take out and look at the whole lottery group and say, hey, should I bring somebody in that's a little different? So maybe I get a different result, and maybe we have a little bit more diversity and inclusion in the process. And so this is one of the ideas that we're working on, and what we want to do is make sure that this makes sense for the rest of the group. And so we're going to be sending out an email at probably next week sometime, seeing if anybody wants to join us, and so that we can give some of these suggestions and see if we have buy-in and see if this is a process that we can go forward with. And then Anthony has the other part that we're thinking of working on.
Yes, so it all came about because, DEI is such a large topic, and sometimes you get lost in the just where to begin. It's like saying, hey, let's start a group about, making the world a better place. It's like, okay, where do we begin? Is there a PowerPoint for that? So, my experience and some of the supervisors in the field, we do, we're having a lot of turnover with people retiring. And so we get the part about the interview process of, the questionnaire. It's like, oh, you got to pick one question from DEI, and you just kind of sneak it in there, and it's like, well, what does that mean? What are we supposed to look for? How are we supposed to look at reactions or things like that? So it's just our way of kind of sneaking it in there without being blatant, oh, we need to do this, where you get some training as to what to look for, what do these questions mean, what are some of these terms that are coming out out there. And so it's a learning process for us, and it's hopefully a learning process for you, where it's not so much here. So we are hopefully getting to have a list of people who are interested in doing something like that, and then also including people who don't normally go through interview processes. So you can select one of your teammates to say, hey, you want to be part of this list? Because I was part of a recent hire, and it was an HR process, and they invited me, and I thought, why do you want the field out there? And then, of course, later on, I find out it was Sherry, and I was like, oh, she would be great communicating with people on the field. She has that personality or experience. So that's what we're going for, and hopefully we can kind of go about DI without just blatant classes, but more just integrating it into what we do currently. So we just thought we'd say hello and let us know. And I know we don't have a PowerPoint, but it was just like, hey, let's just ask them, get them, So you'll see an email. Please interject any opinions. And anybody else that wants to? Or no? Okay.
So it sounds like you're going to be creating a pool of candidates who you use for the interview process, right?
That's one of the things that we were thinking of maybe doing, but we wanted to make sure that we were on the same track of most of the other managers and supervisors, and we are going to give you guys some ideas of what we're thinking of and see if you guys agree with it. And then if not, if you guys think of something else that we haven't thought of, because we're just a small group and we want to make sure that we include enough people so we get a diverse, ideas.
So ideally, yes, you'd have a list of people who have gone through some training of that, oh, this is, and then you can pick from, if you're in the field, you could say, oh, there's somebody in, analytics that is on the list. I'd like to have him on our, our panel. So you can help that diversification there. So, all good? All right, got some nodding. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're bound and determined to get out of here early, I can tell. So we have an hour to talk about budget. You've all been very bad. No. Kathy and I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget development process this year and give you a little clearer sense of what our expectations are, and also to help answer questions that you might have. So I wanted to start off by talking about the memo that you all received recently around the budget process this time around. And we gave you 5 kind of overarching guidelines, and I wanted just to talk through them with you so you understand kind of from my perspective what's behind them, and then give you a chance to ask some questions if you need clarification, if you're unsure, or you're not quite sure how to apply it to what you've normally done for the last 25 years. Have that opportunity, and then Kathy's going to share some more information, and then we'll have some more general Q&A at the end. So the first one was around accuracy and accountability, and this is the one I've talked about this for a couple of years now. Kathy's going to give you some examples of some real-time examples of what happens when we miss our targets when we budget. And we have, I would say, a historical practice of budgeting a really big dinner plate and then having a much smaller appetite when it actually comes time to eat dinner. And we do that from a place of scarcity, right? We're afraid that if we don't pack our buffet plate to the maximum, we'll go hungry at the end of the day, and there won't be a chance to go back to the buffet line with a second plate and get some more carbs and a little overcooked steak. The problem we have with that is when we leave steak on our plate, it raises credibility questions from our policymakers, the commission, around our credibility around our business planning and our budgeting. If it's a one-off thing, they get it. When it happens year after year and the running joke is timing differences, it starts to really raise questions. And so I've asked in the past to really try and hone our pencils, sharpen our pencils. Let's be realistic about what we think we can do. And I know that we don't have the answers to every question when we might need them for the budget process. I get that. We've said all along we're going to crawl, walk, run. We're going to test and learn. And we're going to course correct. So I get that. There's plenty of room for that. But this time around, I'm really asking to be very, very realistic about, we've got a lot of experience now over the last 3-4 years, moving big projects, not just one project, but multiple projects at a time. We've got some more experience now. What can we really accomplish? And if I see places where we have historically over-budgeted or not been able to deliver on a current course, and I see budgets coming in that are looking the same way, that's going to get a lot more extra scrutiny. So your executive team member is going to have to be prepared to answer some pretty hard questions in order to justify it. It's not that we won't maybe end up approving it, but I really want us to be looking closely so that the budget we present to the commission at the outset is one that I can really stand behind and say, yeah, I think we can actually deliver 80% of this rather than 60%. So that's the first one. The second one is around expense management. And this is really about trying to find ways to be more efficient in the work we do. We describe our budget process as being zero-based, but it's not really a zero-based budget, because a zero-based budget is you actually start from zero. We don't do a current service level budget, which the rest of state government does, right? Which is to say, take the cost of what you did last year, increase it by an inflationary factor, and that's what it is, the cost to do what you currently do. We don't do that, which is good, because current service level budgeting is horrible, because it just reinforces baked-in inefficiency. But a true zero-based budget is you start actually from zero, and you figure out what you want to do that year, and you figure out what it's going to cost to get you there. We don't do that either. But what I'm asking you to do is to try to keep your expenses where they were last year. Now, if that means you want to do more, you have to figure out a way to do something less. You have to look for something that we don't actually have to do any longer. An example was one that just came up in the executive team the other day around the binders of our game rules that have to go out to every retailer, and is there a different way we can, in our legal structure, do that? And I think the number I heard was like $65,000 a year for binders and is that right? It's more than that? 70,000. Okay. So let's figure out how we do that differently, and let's spend that $70,000 differently. Right? So I'm not looking for you to cut your budgets, but I'm looking for you to manage your budgets within our expenses. Everywhere else in state government has to prepare 10 and 20% reduction options. Not asking us to do that. I'm asking us to manage within our current resources. Same is true with headcount. We've changed the way we manage positions, and positions that come open aren't necessarily just automatically refilled, right? They have to be justified. They have to come to the executive team. We have to analyze whether or not there's a more important use for that position somewhere else in the organization. So as you're budgeting and you're thinking about your retirement potentials or attrition, don't just assume that, I have that position. Well, you have that position today. Do you still need that position tomorrow? Is there a greater need there somewhere else in the organization? Then the last two are probably the ones where there's probably the greatest room for confusion, because it's a little bit different than what we've done before, which is cross-department development of our budgets. We've been talking about this a lot in the enterprise project realm, right? The big strategic programs that make up our strategic plan, how they touch all across the organization, and we need to bring teams together to look at them. That's really the way we should be operating on a day-to-day basis, because if I've learned one thing in my almost 4 years here now, is you cannot make one single change in this organization without its impact being felt almost everywhere else in the organization. So even your normal operational activities, you might think about, well, I'm going to try and do this a little bit differently. Rather than just plunk some dollars in your budget and check a box on the IT form or the fleet or the facilities form and be done, I'm really asking you to think, okay, who else is going to be impacted by this? Power BI. We're rolling Power BI out. Who else is going to be impacted by that needs to be aware of what we're doing and why? Money's in my budget. I'm going to take the lead on it, but it's really going to also impact retail contracts and the service tax and the warehouse. So before we send the budget in, I want to make sure that you've gotten groups together and have talked about what your plans are for the year. Not just the strategic stuff, but even the day-to-day stuff, those performance improvements, that continuous improvement work. We've really got to make sure that we're communicating so that when the executive team gets the rolled up budget and they come to Kathy and I to walk us through it, they're really able to say, oh yeah, and warehouse understands what it means, distribution knows what it means, the fleet has it prepared, we know, everyone's in the loop. Because what I've experienced sometimes in the past, I'm going to pick on Syed. I'll ask a question of IT, and I'll say, Syed, what is this in the budget? And he'll say, ask Leah or Shandy. And so I ask Leah or Shandy, and they say, well, that's good, the program wanted it. Well, can you tell me why? Well, no, you have to ask them. Right? Because the conversation hasn't been at the right level or at the right depth. I want to be sure that if there's something that's happening in the product world, that the product team can explain it to me, but also the IT team can explain it to me. So that we really know that we've thought this through. Because otherwise, there's no real vetting of the expenditure. It's just, one department's best guess, which could be very accurate, but is it validated against all the other places in the organization that get touched by that? And then lastly is profitability. And we've struggled with this one. Laura, I think this is the day I walked in the door, I asked you, well, how do we determine if we're profitable? And we still struggle to identify what that looks like, and what is a product, and what is a product line, and what is a product portfolio, and what is. At the end of the day, we just need to make sure that there is some return in the product we're making. And if it's not profitable today, like Scoreboard, were on a path towards profitability down the road. So that we're not just throwing money into a product line without a plan for getting it above the line. So let me pause there and drink some water and see if you have questions. Yes, Michael, thank you.
So when you're saying to look across, the organization and you're putting something in, say you have a new project, do you want it to, as best as possible, also anticipate what the costs are for those different groups, or simply how is the impact? The impact can be monetary, can be time, so people have got about the time. How detailed do you want that portfolio view of the project to get that can turn into a project in and of itself, estimated headcount?
Yeah, to the penny, right? No. What I'm looking for is some transparency and some cross-departmental thinking, right? So if product is thinking about a new approach in lane, does marketing know about it? And have they factored that into their plan for the year? Does F&A know about it so they know they need to start planning some of these other work, right? It's not, oh, I'm going to need another FTE over here and I'm going to need, this, that, or the other. It's coordination, planning, awareness, transparency. And it's also, to be clear, one of the problems we have is sometimes costs for an initiative are distributed throughout multiple budget areas, and it's really hard then to say, well, how much is that actually going to cost us, or when does the return? So it's being able to identify, okay, this thing in the budget that sits right here, who's the lead, and where are the tentacles reaching out? Where else are there costs associated? Yeah. Who are my stakeholders? Who is this going to impact? What's that impact look like? Is it in the budget or not? Kathy?
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the buffet packing exercise and what are some of the consequences when that happens. I've attempted to create a visual, which was supposed to be humorous, but I did it yesterday coming down with a cold, and I have no idea if you're even going to smile. So we'll take a shot at it. What I'm hoping, even if you don't smile, what you'll walk away with is maybe some things that you've heard that you don't understand that seem weird. And we do have some weirdness in the way we run our finances. Using Kathy's example, we're a little bit of a snowflake from what you've probably ever seen before. And the reason is the lottery is an organization that was created out of law. So some of the terms that you hear and the things that you may not understand are coming from that, and I'm going to try to help you along and see how, when we go through the budgeting process, what happens to some of those weird things. So there you go. Okay, what do you mean my budget is gone and I have no money? Now, while you may experience that on a personal level, and from time to time I have as well in my personal life, I want to explain what that means when you're here at the lottery doing your budget. So if you think back, we did a budget and we got it approved in June of 2020. And behind the scenes, what you don't see is Barry and I running around trying to figure out whether we can afford what you've turned in, and how does it impact us, and how do we move through the year. And so I took a hypothetical $5 million expense. And I'm not going to argue about whether it's capital or expense at this point. It doesn't matter. It's spending some money. The behind the scenes, what you're not seeing, because Barry and I do it, sometimes over the phone, sometimes at meetings, but we have to look and roll everything up and figure out, okay, so where does all of this leave us? Now, the first thing that comes into play is something called the contingency. You will never see this in an accounting or finance textbook because it's a function of our development under law. Our structure means that we have to be self-funding. That means we can't borrow money like in prior lives when I would go out and we needed money. I'd go out and talk to KeyBank and get a line of credit so I could afford what you're trying to do. I can't do that. I have no borrowing authority, I have no money authority, and DAS cannot give us money. So we have to fund everything we want to do. And that's where the contingency comes in. We have to be able to allow for cash management, meaning that if our revenues drop or if they're not hitting a target, we have to have the money to still pay our bills. We are allowed by law to have a contingency, and it's nothing more than a reserve. It's your little savings account that you have when you want to go buy a new pair of shoes, okay, if you think of it personally, except it's a bigger number. Right now, the approval level is 100 million, which might seem like a lot of money, but it isn't if something were to happen. We have to continue to operate, and I have to continue to pay you. So this is why it's important to you that we always have this in the back of our mind and thinking about the impact of it. And at this budget that you guys did, Barry and I established that the contingency is still there. It's not untouched. We're good. But we also are pretty much assured that we're not going to have any administrative savings. Now, that term is administrative savings come from when we don't spend our budget or we have extra money. If the contingency is full, it has to be transferred to the state. Another easy way to think of it, the contingency is our checkbook balance, and administrative savings is the little money you put aside into it for a later date. So we go through the year, you've got the mid-year budget, and I send out all the documents and say, tell me if you're going to spend what you thought you were going to spend, or if you need to spend more. And you guys come back, give me a budget. We go through this same exercise that we do. We establish that the contingency is still good. And then, if you're spending your money, hopefully we're not going to have administrative savings. And this goes to the buffet concept that Barry was talking about, because once we start to have administrative savings, at the end of the year, if we have it, I have to transfer it. Now, when you turn in your $5 million expense here, and you get to the end of the year and you don't spend it, and the contingency is full, I've got administrative savings. And that's the credibility issue that Barry was talking about. We have to figure out, are we going to transfer it? And what's really painful is if you tell me, oh, I'm just not going to spend it this year, I'm going to spend it in September. Because you still need that money. I have to figure out how to preserve it, preserve the contingency and not spend that to give you what you want. And how am I going to do that? And so that creates the problem for Barry Downtown, where we have to figure out a way that is within our legal structure to save that money for you. And we'd rather not have to do that. We have to go back to the commission. We have to communicate with our stakeholders what we're doing. We have to explain our project plans. We have to explain why we didn't spend it. It gets messy from a stakeholder management perspective. And I don't envy Barry those conversations. They can sometimes not be fun. But what I wanted you to see, you've probably heard, okay, what is the contingency and why does it matter to me? You've probably heard of administrative savings. That's how it happens. And transfers. How does that impact how we go forward into a budget for next year? Because if you don't spend your money and you need it later, I've got to figure out how to get it for you. So that's just a little bit of a pictorial on why packing your plate at the buffet table causes Barry and I migraines. Alex. It has. Well, it's really not all that loaded. It's, actually it is, but the commission can change that number whenever they want. I've been here a long time. I've seen it as low as 30 during recessionary times, which was like truly scary. This level basically covers a couple of months of operating cost if we were to dip. And it used to be that people said that we were recession proof. Let me tell you, in 2009, that theory went out the window. Our revenues dropped almost 25%. When our revenues drop 25%, our costs don't always drop that much, and we still have to be able to fund things. So in the bigger context, it's a dicey question because the commission has to approve it, but the downstream impact on that is it means less transfers. And so people that depend on our funding get impacted by it also. So there's the stakeholder management part of it, and that's not fun. During VLTMP, I had to go and argue to get our transfers reduced so we could pay for this, and I did not get a lot of friendly faces looking at me when I was trying to do that. So, not impossible, just politically challenging and maybe financially challenging.
And Alex, the commission did look at that a couple of years ago when we were starting the strategic planning process and thinking about what our costs were going to be to get everything done we wanted to do. We also knew that we have business interruption insurance and cyber incident insurance. So we have other backup places to go to in certain instances besides just the contingency.
And those are two good insurance policies to have, just like your homeowners and your auto insurance are good to have, but it would have done nothing for us in a business downturn. So while we have them, it's not 100% insurance proof. Couple of things, just as side notes to answer questions that I've heard about. Barry stole my thunder already on the zero-based budget and what that means and how do you do it. But there are things that I've heard of. People will come back and say, well, finance and accounting said that we have to do it that way. And I hear that and I kind of sit and go, I don't remember ever saying that or why that concept is valid. So I want to open it up to you for things that you heard that seem weird that maybe you've never come across in your past lives, and why do they exist? I'm trying to get to the why to help you put the context around why we do what we do. Yes.
So one that I would have would be sometimes when I've heard you have to explain there have been differences in how we treat and have funds in the budget that are available. Say you sign a contract versus when you actually spend the money, and those can expand in this way.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that easier to defend because you can explain that up front? This is what's going to happen. So raising the skids for the fact that there's going to be administrative savings, but we're going to reserve that for the actual payments.
Good question. Let me expand on that. So when this whole issue of timing difference. When I talked about our legal creation, and the fact that we can't borrow money, anything left over has to be transferred. I've already gone over that. But one concept within that is if we sign a large contract, and when I say large, and I put it in the memo this year, maybe $5 million, we cannot sign that money unless we know we have the money to pay for it. And that's when Kathy will jump around and say, okay, we have to set the money aside. And so this is how, remember when I talked about having administrative savings, but you say you need it later? Well, if you are in the process of getting ready or about to sign a contract, I can set that money aside in a separate reserve that's not the contingency, because contingency is unspoken for. I can set it in a place because I'm legally required to perform on that contract, and it's a set-aside fund. Now, I can't do that for nothing. I've got to have a contract that I can point to say that I'm setting it aside for that purchase. But typically what those timing differences, they're going to fall back a lot of times to a large contract, and that's how I help you out by saying, okay, I'm going to set the money aside so we don't transfer it, and you've got it for next year, you're good to go, but put it in the budget.
That's, so, yeah, and is it actual money? So like, let's say you know you're not going to spend it until next year. Actually, in that case, then you're talking about that $5 million available in cash to send in a fund this year, even though you're not going to spend it next year.
Yes, and here's the reason why. Because I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. And in order for you to sign that contract now, I've got to be able to say I have the money. And I can't go with, well, maybe I think so. You know, I can't do that. So if I have the money, I'm going to set it aside so you can perform on your contract. I realize it's confusing, but it's the best I can do given our structure.
Yeah, I think the challenge comes when we're trying to plan for something in its earliest stages. And Heather, I'm glad you agree with me. And we put money in a budget, and we're not sure what we're going to do with it. We don't know if we're buying equipment. We don't know if we're contracting for services. We don't know the scope and size of all of that. And so we put $5 million in the budget for Project X. We don't really know what that looks like just yet, but we want to make sure we have some money for it. And then as the year goes along, we realize that what we really just need to do is spend $500,000 to bring a consultant in to help us scope out what the project is, right? That's just created $4.5 million of administrative savings. Or we're going to buy a whole bunch of VLTs, and we're going to put a big chunk of money in the budget to buy the VLTs, and they're not ready to deploy when we thought they were going to be deployed. That's happened to us in the past, right, Lindsay? Or, you know, we can't get them out as fast as we thought we could, right? So that's part of the reason why I'm really trying to emphasize that cross-departmental development of the budget, right? Have we thought through how this impacts everybody so that we know we can actually deliver on what we want to get done? It's those cases where Kathy then has put money originally in operations that don't get spent or have to get moved to capital or to committed funds or the dreaded
Whatever.
D word.
Oh, depreciation.
Depreciation. That's what causes us problems. And Michael, that's I think where the confusion comes. Like, do you have to have it now? Or we're almost better off, and this is the conversation I'd like you to be having as you develop your budget. We're almost better off not putting money in the budget if we aren't sure what we're going to spend it on, and then we'll deal with it at the mid-year, right? Because then we're not artificially creating administrative savings by filling our plate larger than we know.
And I think that's, for me, that gets to the heart of it, because if we're, you know, in most experiences have been outside of this in private organizations, but, you know, mid-year adjustments are always problem girl, because you're like, we don't have the cash, we didn't budget for that, we're spending as quickly as we can go. So if mid-year adjustments here are seen as a necessary convenience as opposed to a thorn in the side, that's great. I think the other thing that I would wonder about is, should we have some sort of a horizon budget for a second year? Because what you're talking about, where we can be able to say, look, we've got, you know, procurement for BLTs that's going on this year. We know we want to continue that. And we just assume not for budget yet because we only do a 1-year budget. But in the second year, we're going to have 2 more procurements that, based on this year, average this. So can we think about that and say, going into that year, we know we want to have this set aside in theory so that we can look at our budget as we go into the next year without having to be surprised by something and not have the money for something that's a really strategic expense.
And that's why in the memo I said if you're going to spend something over $5 million, come see me. I wish I could write a process for you for all of this. It just isn't that simple.
That's what rules of thumb where we can, in our heads, thinking ahead over a period so that you don't get, or we don't create a situation where you get
Right.
either having to explain before you ask for a budget what's going to happen with that, or get hit with the
And very good point, which is why I want you to come see me. Typically, every year, what I do is I'm not only doing the 1-year projection, I'm doing a very high-level 4-year projection to look and see where we're going to end up. And knowing what those plans are helps me get a little bit more finite on that.
And I want to, I'll get to you in a second, Lindsay. I want to go back to your first point, Michael, around the mid-year.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a really foreign concept to me, right? Like I came from agency land, right? I'm looking at my Tessa over there from DHS no. Like if you didn't have it, you're never going to get it. And if you offer it up as a savings, you're never going to get it back. Well, it's an entirely different mindset here. And that's a hard thing to get past, right? It's that approach from a scarcity perspective, right? Like if I don't have it, I'm never going to get it again. But what I think our commission has shown is if you can make your case for it, and we have the resources to do it, so we have the contingency, they'll put that money back in. Lindsay.
I just want to clarify a couple things. While it's true that sometimes VLTs aren't ready, it's also true that most VLT software, and I'm sure a lot of stuff other than it's just we sign a contract for a game and we're not getting it for 10 months. It's just so in 1 year I'm saying, hey Kathy, I need the money to set aside, but I'm not actually spending it for 10 months. And maybe it's changed, but when it's capital, that was easier. But now games are expense, so I hate to drag you into capital versus expense, but expenses are different.
They are different.
They can't go into a fund and carry it. So then how?
But okay, so I think the thing that maybe isn't apparent here is any large contract, regardless of how you categorize it, tell me about it so I can figure out what to do with it. Yeah, exactly. You're my frequent flyer customer. And so
Would you like your chocolate or a free cocktail?
yeah. But knowing that, and I mean, I hate to say it's a little bit selfish, but it helps me plan. So it's the communication and if you're not, I can make a $10 million game budget. If you're going to sign a contract, I can make that a course adjustment for you.
So I'm just making sure nothing's changed in how you want that.
No, the only thing that changed, but it wasn't this year, you're right. When we treated game software as capital, we had more wiggle room. It's not as straightforward as an expense, but it's not impossible either. Laura?
It does make it a little more challenging, though, to go into that unknown cost question, right? Like if your budget ranges become more difficult when they're operational.
Mm-hmm.
So the sharper your pencil can be, the better.
Yeah, and it does, I mean, they're big numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's my pain. I'm going to give you a little view into my world, all right? Around May of every odd-numbered year, the legislature is trying to figure out how much money they have to spend for the next 2 years. And I will invariably get a phone call from one of the co-chairs of Ways and Means, and I'll get summoned down to a conference room in legislative fiscal where they will ask me, how much are you going to have in administrative savings? And I'm going to say, none. Or I'm going to say 5 million or 10 million. But what I've been saying is we're in investment mode. And we have a strategic plan to do all these things that are going to generate long-term revenue, which means you should not expect any administrative savings because I've got to spend that money. And I get them to say, okay, that makes sense. We'll live with what's in the forecast. And then you don't spend $2 million. Lindsay doesn't spend $20 million. You know, well, yeah, kind of. Some years, right? Oh, we're not ready. Yeah, okay. You know, IT doesn't spend, I mean, the IT budget is a challenge because a lot of their spend is precautionary, right? They've got to have some money available. If something breaks, we've got to be able to replace it. So they don't spend $10 million. And now I've got $35 million worth of administrative savings when I've spent a lot of political capital getting them to say and be okay with there not being any. Go for it. I get a awesome, thanks. But the problem that I have then is the next year. And I come back and say, there will be no administrative expenses. You said that last year and you gave me 35 million. So is it going to be 50 this year? Oh. Yeah, and the one of the mechanisms we have to manage that, Michael, to your point, is the commission can set that money aside above and beyond the contingency. But that's putting the commission in the position of voting not to transfer $30 million to parks, schools.
Which looks great.
Yeah. When you have a former legislator on your commission, that's a super easy ask for that. Heather?
The mid-year is a planning tool, and I don't remember who said it, but I would take the negative connotation, if you can, off it, because it's there to help us plan for what we need. And now what I don't want is not, I don't want everybody not putting money in their budget and turning in zero. Please don't do that to me. But be smart about it. Use your best information that you have, knowing that you can course correct at mid-year. And just remember the world that we work in and the context. We have a contingency. We have to manage administrative savings. usually we have the ability to flex. And, Barry and I are not talking about a $500,000 swing here. We're talking about the millions, the eye-catching dollar amounts. And so, or the things that are going to, if we don't spend it, Barry's got to say, I just found $30 million. We don't want that either. If you have questions, it's because we do have a lot of projects that are new, it's better just to come and let's talk about it. I can't give you a definitive, if it's this, then do this. That's not the world that we work in. But the mid-year is for course correcting. It's for course correcting for what you're not going to do plus what you need to do. And usually within our operations, we have wiggle room. I don't want to say, if something doesn't get approved, I don't want you to say, but you said that we could get it at mid-year. I can't ever make those statements in advance. It's a process that we have to follow within our financial structure, but usually I can find a way to do things. Can't always say always, but usually.
And I'll just add,
it depends on the urgency of the item. Yeah.
Remember also that the commission agreed that if in our learning process, one of the strategic programs had an urgent need, we could come to them with an ask more regularly. So, while we'd like to get everything in first and at the mid-year, if something crops up at the very last minute, we don't have to rush to throw an unknown number in at mid-year. We can come back to them a couple months later with a better number. And what I would say, I think to echo Kathy's, it's about sort of size and urgency, right? What I don't want you to do is to put 500,000 in the budget and then tell me at mid-year it was 5 million, right? Or 50 million. I'd rather know at the outset that, well, we've put $1 million in, it might be more like 2, but we're not sure. Or, does that make sense? Like, the big surprises are not what we want at mid-year, but mid-year is really about taking advantage of what we've learned and now know.
Yeah, let's get rid of the negative connotation about anything to do with mid-year. It's to help us all plan.
And thank you for asking that question, because that's what we kind of want to dispel here, right? What are those old apocryphal myths that are out there that you're like,
Or that you're afraid of bringing it up because you don't, We are fortunate in that, we have a system that we work within here at the lottery where, because we are self-funding, we can look at those funds and figure out how we need to manage the business. It's not like a line item situation that you may have experienced at other state agencies where there's no money available. Now, I don't want to imply that we have more money than we know what to do with. That's not the case either, because we have a lot of very tall ticket items that we're trying to upgrade, and that's going to take money. We also don't want, and I just want to go back and support what Barry said about his challenges trying to communicate things downtown. We also don't want the legislature coming in and attempting, because they don't believe us, coming in and attempting to tell us how to run our business, because we won't get the outcomes that we're looking for if we have that happen.
I'll talk more about that before I let you go. Any other questions? Yeah, Laura.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think in past memos, I have said if you can reasonably estimate a month to put it in, we won't chop it up. I'd rather have it be in the wrong month and know that that's what's happening, as opposed to constantly having everything spread over 12 months and then I can't even tell what our run rate looks like. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I would, okay, if we can dispel a myth, I would rather have you tell me what month you think it's going to happen in, or months, and be wrong than to chop it into 12 months. So feel free to be wrong on the month that you put it in. And then let me know. Put a comment in your spreadsheet or send me an email so I know what's going on. Most of these things I digest and I know. Mm-hmm.
Anything else? I really didn't plan on spending an hour on this, so.
I know. And nobody has fallen out of their chair on the floor asleep. I'm impressed.
All right, let me just wrap up and just give you a quick update on the legislature, because the short session began on Monday of this week, and you may have read in the news media, you may read in the news media that there are a couple of bills dealing with lottery that we're working through. One was introduced by Oregon State University and is a prohibition on college sports wagering. We are in active negotiations with OSU and U of O at this point in time to see if we can't get to a middle ground. My preference is unrestricted wagering on all college sports. Their preference is no wagering at all on any college sports, and my approach was, well, can we find some place in between those two positions? So we are in active negotiations, as I said. I think we actually have a lot of room and a framework under which we can get to an agreement. And if we can get there, we will be moving that through this session probably as early as next week, moving it out of committee and through the process. The advantage for us is that gives us the clear green light to bring college sports into our product portfolio, even if there are some sideboards around the types of wagering and maybe who can wager that are included. So I remain cautiously optimistic on that bill. The second bill is introduced by a handful of legislators in the House that, as drafted, limits the types of games that we can sell on mobile devices to sports and the multi-state games. That bill is going to have like 6 dozen amendments. It could have wager limits for sports betting. It might have sunsets on sports betting. It might have all sorts of other things. But this comes from a small handful of legislators who are a little irked that they don't have as direct oversight of the lottery as they would want to. It's a long-running issue. I told one of the legislators, he says, well, I've got this legislative council opinion that says we can. I said, yeah, I know what the opinion says. It's the same opinion I got 20 years ago when I asked for it when I was in the Senate caucus. So, this is not a new issue. We have made an offer today to support an amendment that would say lottery would not offer high-velocity casino-style games on a mobile device. This is a policy position I've taken from day one when we started talking mobile. It has the support of the commission and the governor. I don't believe it to be responsible gaming to let people sit at home and play VLT-style games on their phones at 3 o'clock in the morning after all the bars have closed. I would be willing to put that into statute. If they want to address the broader oversight, to me that's a much more complicated issue to deal with in a short 40-day session. And I believe the chair of the committee agrees with me. So we've made that offer. We've also offered to put in some clarifying language that will allow us to spend our funds for research into the social impacts of mobile gaming. So we will see what they do with that bill. So if you hear rumors that the lottery is closing down, or sports is going to be closed down, or the legislature is taking over, or you'll never get to bet on college, no, none of that is true. But we are having to spend a lot of time in conversation. If you hear weird rumors, feel free to shoot me an email, or Matt or Chris Scaro. We're all actively engaged with them. Also, just in the information piece this afternoon, in fact, as we speak, the hearing is happening in Marion County Court over the lawsuit around the release of some of the contract details with our contract with SB Tech. So I don't know if we'll get a ruling from the judge today or if that will come down in the future, but that's happening this afternoon, which is where Matt is right now. Any questions on that? Yeah.
So how are you defining high velocity games? If we, let's say we had a game when the field team, you wanted to have a set, for fun play in the same game online, on wager. Or if we talk about another business model where we allow people to, when you do interruptions, stuff like that, you can buy credits to just play games. So you're not putting money in and losing money. You have already spent the money and you bought credits to do it. How is this defined in a way that still allows us the flexibility to say, fine, BLT is not online, but there are a lot of other casino-style games that are not high velocity that you can play. Roulette would be a big one to stop or something.
Right. That's the tricky part. We don't have a set definition right now. We've got some drafts that are based off of what's currently in rule right now. If there is interest in moving down that direction, we'll need to spend some real quick, deep time making sure that whatever we put in there doesn't unintentionally foreclose doors we may want to leave open down the road.
Involved in discussions over wager types that will be allowed for sports betting to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves in a way, limiting ourselves in a way that makes it less profitable for us to.
Well, it will be less profitable. Any limitations we put in place will be less profitable than unrestricted wagering. But yes, the team is involved through Kathy. Right. Right. That's why we're thinking about things like has a random number generator, player initiated, speed of play, all those sorts of things would be factors that would keep things out like in game. But one of the things we're considering is, not player specific in-game wagers to protect that individual student's athlete's integrity. Yes, it is a dance. Anything else? Yeah, because we would love to hear more about comp in class, Janelle. Yeah. I think they'll both will need to be disinfected after today. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.